Chapter 1. In front of me was my mother's slightly anxious expression, and the muffled sounds around me gradually sharpened into clarity. "Audrey, what's so important? Spit it out. Be quick about it. Your father's waiting for me to go home and cook dinner. You said you won something. What kind of prize is it?" Her questions jolted me. I glanced around quickly. This was my rented apartment. And then it hit me. I'd been reborn. In my previous life, I won a 30 million yuan lottery. Ecstatic, I had dreamt of taking my mom away from our crumbling home to start fresh somewhere new. She had seemed so supportive at first, agreeing with me wholeheartedly. But when my father came home, she spilled the beans. My father, an incorrigible gambler, was over the moon when he found out. He stormed over to me, demanding the winnings. "Where's the ticket? Hand it over. How dare you win the lottery and not tell me? Planning to run away with your mother behind my back. You ungrateful brat. Your money is my money. Who gave you the right to decide on your own?" He closed in on me, his tone menacing, forcing me to surrender the ticket. But how could I let him take it? That money was my escape, my chance to finally break free from this wretched life of handing over my salary and scraping by. I refused, and his anger boiled over. He started beating me while my mother slipped away to search my room. She found my bank card, took it, and left without a word. My father used the money to gamble even more recklessly, while my mother returned later to feign sympathy. "Audrey, don't blame me. I'm doing this for your own good," she whispered, almost kindly. "You're just a girl. What do you need so much money for? It's safer with your father. This family still needs him in charge." She left me lying there, bruised and battered, without a shred of remorse. My father squandered the money on high-end clubs and flaunted his winnings in our family group chat. Relatives from our hometown flocked to him, lavishing him with compliments, and he lent the money out to feed his vanity. Desperate to salvage what was left, I confronted him, only to stumble into a scene with debt collectors. The confrontation escalated, and before I knew it, I was dragged into the chaos. My father's reckless words provoked them, and in their rage, they turned on me. Despite my pleas, they stabbed me to death. And it all started because my mother betrayed me. But this time it would be different. I would guard that money with my life and live on my own terms. Chapter 2. Hearing the slight irritation in my mother's voice, I blinked, quickly coming up with a plausible excuse. "Mom, I meant I won an air fryer at the company's annual party. Do you want it?" She rolled her eyes at me. "An air fryer? You sounded so excited. I thought you won the lottery." Her casual comment made my heart race. "If only I had that kind of luck," I replied lightly. "Still, since you've won something, I'll ride your good fortune and buy a lottery ticket myself. Who knows, maybe we'll hit the jackpot. If we win, your dad won't have a reason to hit me anymore. Anyway, where's the air fryer? Hand it over. I'll take it home and fry some chicken for your dad." Hearing her, I couldn't help the bitter smile that tugged at my lips. This woman, who ran back to my abusive father time and time again, was the one I had so foolishly trusted in my last life. I still remembered her joy when I told her about the lottery. She had clasped my hands, laughing and beaming. But her happiness hadn't been for me. It had been for my father. To her, my father would always come first. I was nothing more than a walking ATM. She must have been planning to tell him the moment I revealed the prize, though she'd hidden it well in front of me. Sure enough, as soon as she returned home, she told him everything. I'd been packing my belongings when I heard a knock at the door. Thinking it was her, I opened it to find my father there to rob me. Shaking off those memories, I took a deep breath and handed her the air fryer. I had bought it a few days ago, intending to take it home later. I hadn't expected it to serve as a decoy today. As soon as she left, I began packing my things, preparing to leave this place for good. The 30 million yuan prize had already been claimed. After taxes, I was left with 24 million safely sitting in my account. But memories of my past life made me wary. I decided to open multiple bank accounts and spread the money out as a precaution. By the afternoon, I had everything sorted. I was just starting to plan a trip to celebrate my newfound freedom when my phone rang. It was my cousin Lucas. "Audrey, did you win the lottery? 30 million. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't told anyone this time. How on earth did Lucas find out? Wait, he was in our hometown. He couldn't have heard it here. Did he see me at the lottery center? Sweat formed on my palms, but I forced myself to sound calm. Come on, Lucas. You know how unlucky I am. Winning 30 million? Be serious. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off and end the call, but Lucas was persistent. Audrey, don't deny it. I saw you. He saw me? Panic surged through me, but I clenched my fist, nails digging into my palm to steady myself. Lucas, I've been at home the past few days. You must have mistaken me for someone else. He chuckled. Audrey, if it wasn't you, why are you so nervous? Look at the picture I just sent you. Tell me it's not you. My phone buzzed, a message popping up. I clicked on it, and the moment I saw the photo, my blood ran cold. Chapter 3. The person in the photo was undeniably me. But I had covered myself tightly, wearing loose-fitting clothes that obscured my figure. Even so, anyone familiar with me would definitely recognize me. My heart raced as I scrambled to think of an excuse. Lucas's voice came through the phone again. Audrey, you've got so much money now. Why don't you transfer 100 or 80,000 to your brother? Let me share in your good fortune. His words made me clench my teeth in frustration. What a shameless demand. 100 or 80,000. Why not just rob a bank instead? I forced myself to remain calm. Lucas, that's not me in the photo. You must have mistaken someone else. I have something urgent to take care of, so I need to hang up now. Before I could end the call, Lucas's tone turned threatening. Audrey, if you don't transfer the money to me, I'll tell everyone. Let's see how long you can keep it hidden. Don't forget, Dad still owes a mountain of debt. The line went dead. I stood frozen, my hand trembling with anger. Pacing back and forth in my apartment, I tried to calm myself. No, I had to leave now. If Lucas could recognize me, others might too. And if that happened, my money would truly be at risk. I quickly started packing, planning to move out the next day. But Lucas acted faster than I could have anticipated. That very evening, my father showed up. With a key to my apartment, he walked straight in. I was watching TV when the door opened, startling me. Seeing my father there filled me with dread. Sure enough, he wasted no time and started yelling. Audrey, hand over the money. You won the lottery and dared to keep it to yourself? You ungrateful brat, how dare you hide it from me? If Lucas hadn't called, I wouldn't even know about this. His words sent a chill down my spine. That scumbag Lucas. When I refused to give him money, he went straight to my father. What was I supposed to do now? Was my money about to be taken from me again? My heart pounded as I desperately tried to think of a solution. But my father didn't give me a chance. Grabbing a broom, he swung it at me, catching me off guard. I stumbled backward, the blow landing squarely on me. Before I could recover, he kicked me hard in the chest, then began pummeling me with his fists. The difference in strength was overwhelming. I couldn't fight back. I could only curl up into a ball, bracing myself for the pain. Just then, my mother walked in. She looked at us, clicking her tongue in disapproval. So it's true, you really won the lottery. And this girl, winning and trying to hide the money instead of handing it over? How selfish can you be? Not even thinking about your family. Where's the money? Give it to me. I'll use it to pay off your father's debts. Her words made me bite down hard on my lip. I had been given a second chance in life. No way was I letting them take my money. My priority now was to find a way to get them out of my apartment. Wincing in pain, I looked up at my father. Dad, I didn't win the lottery. I don't even know how to buy a ticket. How could I win? Lucas must have gotten it wrong. If I'd won, I would have handed the money over immediately. My father glared at me, clearly unconvinced. Don't lie to me. Lucas sent me a photo. It's obviously you. Stop pretending. If you don't hand over the money right now, I'll beat it out of you. He raised his foot to kick me again. Panicking, I shouted, Dad, I swear I'm not lying. If you don't believe me, I'll show you my bank card. That gave him pause. I struggled to my feet and limped to my bedroom. Taking my time, I retrieved my wallet. My father snatched it from my hands. Rummaging through it, he quickly found my bank card. What's the PIN? He demanded. Clenching my fists, I reluctantly gave him 6 digits. Without another word, he stormed out, my mother following closely behind. Chapter 4. After they left, I locked the door and cautiously sat on the couch. Thank goodness I had acted quickly. Earlier that afternoon, I had gone to the bank to open new accounts. I'd hidden those cards and kept only my regular salary card in my wallet. There wasn't much money in that account. Even if they checked, they'd only find a few thousand yuan. That would be enough to appease them. Sure enough, half an hour later, my father stormed back in, cursing. That bastard Lucas. He tricked me. Got me all excited for nothing. He threw the card onto the floor along with some cash. I emptied your account. Here's the card. I silently picked it up. As my father was about to leave, my mother glanced into my room and froze when she spotted my suitcase. She stopped him. Charles, wait. Look at that girl's suitcase. She must have transferred the money and is planning to run away. Her words made my heart skip a beat. My father turned to see the suitcase, and his face darkened with fury. You sneaky brat. Trying to fool me, are you? Where's the money? Hand it over, or I'll make you regret it. He kicked the suitcase, spilling its contents all over the floor. My mother pointed triumphantly at the clothes. See? I told you she's lying. She's planning to take off and leave us with nothing, even after we saw that photo. What kind of daughter does this? Hand over the money, Audrey. You're just a girl. How much could you possibly need? We'll leave you a few thousand. That's more than enough for you to get by. I stared at her, my gaze growing colder by the second. Why hadn't I realized before how manipulative she could be? My father raised his hand to hit me again, but I quickly pulled out my phone. Dad, it's a business trip. The company just informed me. I have to leave tomorrow morning. Look at the messages in the group chat. He snatched the phone from my hand and scrolled through it with a scowl. After a moment, he threw it back at me. Tell me the truth, Audrey. Did you win the lottery? Of course, I couldn't admit it. I shook my head vehemently. No. Why would I lie to you, Dad? My salary is barely enough to get by. If I'd won, I'd have cashed it in already and wouldn't still be working. He studied my face in silence, while my mother muttered suspiciously from the side. How do we know you didn't hide other accounts? Maybe you transferred the money and are lying to us. My heart skipped another beat. Dad, Mom, I'm not lying. Search the house if you don't believe me. I feigned nonchalance and opened my bedroom door wide. My father gave my mother a look, and she rushed into my room to search. After 10 minutes, she came back empty-handed, her face a mix of anger and disappointment. My father gave me one last glare before stomping off, muttering, If you're lying, I swear I'll make you pay. Once they were gone, my knees gave out and I collapsed onto the floor. That was too close. I nearly got caught. I cursed Lucas under my breath as I got up to pack my belongings again. I wasn't lying. The company had indeed assigned me a business trip. When I'd first seen the message, I'd planned to decline, but my parents had shown up before I could reply. Thank goodness I hadn't responded yet. Otherwise, everything might have been exposed. It seemed I couldn't quit my job just yet. If I quit, I'd have no excuse to stay away, and that would spell real trouble. As I pondered my next steps, my eyes fell on the scattered clothes from my suitcase, and an idea struck me. Chapter 5. The next day, I went on my business trip as scheduled. During the trip, I received more threatening calls from Lucas. He was convinced that the person in the photo was me, demanding money over and over again. I brushed him off with vague excuses and hung up. After a few failed attempts, Lucas lost his patience. His threats escalated. He swore he'd share the photo in the family group chat so everyone could see it and claim their share of the money. Go ahead, I said coldly before cutting the call. Not surprisingly, Lucas made good on his word. He uploaded the photo to the family chat. The group erupted in chaos. 30 million yuan. Who wouldn't be tempted? Within minutes, my phone was bombarded with calls from relatives, uncles, aunts, cousins. Even my parents were among the relentless callers. I ignored all of them, switching off my phone to escape the noise. I could easily imagine their outrage. But what did that have to do with me? I had won that money fair and square. Why should I share it with them? Let them fume. Let them rant. It wasn't my problem. In my past life after my death, they had celebrated. For them, my death meant my money was up for grabs. They acted like vultures squabbling over my assets. But not this time. This time I'd protect my money. This time I'd live well for myself. When my business trip ended, I returned home to a house full of people. It was a sea of faces, relatives from my hometown, all sitting in my living room. Their gazes burned with resentment, clearly fueled by my refusal to answer their calls. As soon as I walked in, my aunt pointed her finger at me and began to scold. "Look at you, Audrey. Winning the lottery and trying to run away? If Lucas hadn't told us, we'd still be in the dark. We're family. What's wrong with sharing the money with us? 30 million yuan. Do you even know how much that is? If you split it among us, each of us would still get a few 100,000. You'd still have plenty left over." Another aunt chimed in, her voice oozing with entitlement. "Exactly. Your cousin is getting married soon, and they need to buy a house. Your money would be perfect for that." "Yes," someone else agreed. "We're family. Nobody in our family is stingy. You're just a junior. Do you even need that much money? It's better if we all benefit together." Their words sickened me. They wanted to split my money as if I owed them something. 20-some people all eyeing my 30 million like predators circling prey. By the time they were done, I wouldn't even have scraps left. How ridiculous. I felt a coldness creep into my chest as my father suddenly stepped forward. He shoved the relatives aside, his tone laced with irritation. "Get out. All of you. This is my family's money. Why are you sticking your noses in? If there's any sharing to be done, it'll be among us three, me, my wife, and my daughter. You lot have no claim to it. If you want money so badly, go buy a lottery ticket yourself. When I needed to borrow money, where were you? All of you pretended you didn't know me. Now that my daughter has money, you come crawling back? Have some shame." His words made several of the relatives look visibly embarrassed. But I knew better. His irritation wasn't about protecting me, it was about securing the money for himself. Turning to me, he said gruffly, "Come on, let's go inside and talk." I hesitated, knowing full well what awaited me if I followed him. Beatings and more threats. I pinched myself hard to bring tears to my eyes, then spoke, my voice trembling. I didn't win the lottery. That's not me in the photo. Why won't anyone believe me? I just got back from a business trip. If I had that kind of money, why would I still be working? Wouldn't I be off traveling the world? Turning to the relatives, I pleaded, "Aunt, uncle, please believe me. That really isn't me in the photo. Just go home, all of you." They weren't convinced. My eldest aunt even pulled out her phone, comparing the photo to me, pointing out every similarity with painstaking detail. Panic bubbled in my chest, and I gradually lowered my head, feigning guilt. Chapter 6. Seeing my reaction, my aunt's triumphant smile widened. "I knew it was you, you little liar. Now you have nothing to say, huh?" I bit my lip and tears began to well up in my eyes. I glanced at my mother nervously before hesitatingly speaking up. "That person. It wasn't me. It was my mom. My mom was the one who won." Everyone turned to look at my mother. She stared at me, her expression filled with disbelief. "You little brat, what nonsense are you spouting? I didn't buy a lottery ticket. How could it possibly be me? The person in the photo is clearly you." I replied, my voice shaky as I watched her. "Mom, stop hiding it," I urged. "Just tell everyone the truth. After all, you can't spend 1 billion yuan all by yourself." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. "What? 1 billion? I thought it was 30 million? How did it become 1 billion? Sis, did you really win 1 billion? My aunt's voice trembled, a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. After all, 1 billion yuan was an unfathomable amount of money. With such wealth, who could resist? But under the gaze of so many people, my mother grew increasingly anxious. The truth was, she had social anxiety, and my words had startled her. The others misunderstood her fear, assuming it was guilt. She opened her mouth to explain, but with everyone speaking over one another, she couldn't get a word in. Finally, she turned to look at me. She slapped me across the face. "You little liar. What are you talking about? When did I win 1 billion yuan? If I had, do you think I would have come to you? Where's the money? Hand it over and share it with everyone." I covered my face, swallowing the bitterness rising in my chest, and choked out, "Mom, wasn't this your idea? You were the one who said we couldn't tell anyone about winning." You said $1 billion was too much, and if anyone knew, they'd all come to take it. You told me to keep it a secret, to turn off my phone if anyone called. Why are you blaming me now? I know you don't want to share the money, but you can't possibly spend all of it alone. You should at least share it. My mother raised her hand to slap me again, but my father intervened, grabbing her arm. His breath was quick and shallow, excitement evident in his voice. Courtney, why didn't you tell me about this? Where's the money? Hurry up and bring it out. My mother froze, speechless. I don't have any money. I don't even buy lottery tickets. Have you forgotten? I added quietly. Mom, you told me you bought the ticket that day. Don't you remember? When you went to claim the prize, you even wore my clothes to avoid being recognized. How can you deny it now? At that, everyone finally understood. My mother and I had similar builds. If I said the person in the photo was her, they would believe it without question. Sure enough, my aunt pulled out the photo again and compared it to my mother. After a moment of silent scrutiny, she slapped her leg in realization. It's Courtney. Courtney, you won such a huge prize and didn't tell anyone? If Lucas hadn't seen the photo online, we'd still be in the dark. Courtney, let's go, let's share the money. My aunt grabbed my mother's arm, and the rest of the crowd closed in, surrounding her. My mother tried to explain, but no one was listening. The scene quickly descended into chaos. Finally, my father shouted at the top of his lungs, and the crowd slowly backed off. But their eyes gleamed with greed, looking at my mother as though she were prey. They seemed ready to pounce, eager to claim their share. Chapter 7. My father grabbed my mother and shook her. That day, I saw 2 lottery tickets on the table. Was one of them the winning ticket? You won the lottery and you didn't tell me? Courtney, you're getting bolder. With my reminder, my father finally remembered that my mother had bought lottery tickets that day. He shook her even harder. Where's the money? Hand it over. With that money, I can pay off my gambling debts, and we can buy a big house. You said you wanted to travel. I can take you anywhere, even abroad. My father grew more excited, clearly already dreaming about the future. My mother was on the verge of tears. From the moment she arrived, no one had listened to her explanations. I was the one who won the lottery, not her. But I spoke so convincingly that everyone believed it was her. I quietly stepped back, ready to watch the show. My mother called out to me, Audrey, stand still. Who taught you to lie like this? You won the lottery, not me. Why are you blaming me? Why won't you give us the money? How can you be so heartless? Hearing this, tears welled up in my eyes. I took out my phone and showed our chat history. Mom, how can you lie? Our chat history is right here. Look, you even transferred 10,000 yuan to me. Why won't you admit it? I confidently placed my phone on the table. My aunt tried to grab it, but my father got it first. He scrolled through the messages, his excitement growing. I knew he believed my story. In his mind, he was convinced my mother had won 1 billion yuan. After reading the messages, he kicked my mother to the ground. You wretch! You won the lottery and didn't tell me. Blaming Audrey instead. You say you have no money, but where did this 10,000 come from? He shoved the phone in my mother's face. She turned pale as she read. Because it was indeed her WeChat account. The chat history was real. She trembled, taking out her phone. My father snatched it from her. But her chat history with me was empty. My mother quickly explained. Her chat history is fake. I never talked to her. I don't know where she got that from. My father stared at the blank screen, confused. I frantically explained. Mom, you delete your chat history every day. Did you forget? Your messages are gone, but mine are still here. My father realized and slapped my mother again, making her face swell. She tried to explain, but my father was already beating her. In the struggle, her phone fell into a nearby bucket of water. Seeing this, I quietly sighed in relief. It was a stroke of luck. Now the only evidence was gone. I wondered how my mother would explain herself now. Chapter 8. Soon my father was pulled away. After all, the relatives were still waiting for my mother to transfer the money. They couldn't let her get too hurt. My uncles held my father back, while my mother was helped to the couch by my aunt. My aunt, her eyes gleaming, sat next to my mother. Courtney, why are you doing this? Just hand over the money. There's no need to get beaten up. You have 1 billion yuan. How much are you planning to share with us? My aunt stared at her, but my mother remained silent, the room growing tense. Finally, my other aunt tried to smooth things over. Let's leave it for today. Let my sister rest. Brother-in-law, you should talk to her calmly. Why hit her? We'll go now. You talk to her. She urged the others to leave. They didn't want to go, but with my mother saying nothing, they couldn't get the money right away, so they left. They would have to try again later. After they left, the house grew quiet. My father told me to go to my room so he could talk to my mother. I was more than happy to comply and quickly went to my room. Once inside, I realized my back was soaked with sweat. Even though I had planned this, I was still afraid something would go wrong and ruin everything. But it had all gone smoothly. The lottery win was successfully pinned on my mother. Now she would have to deal with the consequences. I hadn't lied about the 1 billion yuan. After I won the 30 million, the same lottery outlet sold a 1 billion yuan winning ticket. It made the news, so I remembered it clearly. When I was packing my suitcase, I saw the clothes I wore on the day I won. Those clothes were my mother's, given to me when she no longer wore them. I usually wore them for chores because they were loose and comfortable. On the day I claimed the prize, I wore those clothes. I had only intended to disguise myself, but it turned out I could use it to shift the blame to my mother. But I had no regrets. My mother didn't deserve sympathy. In my previous life, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't have met such a tragic end. Given a second chance, I wouldn't let her off. Because my mother couldn't produce the money, my father beat her again. He then dragged her home and I quickly followed. I wasn't going to miss the show. I cheerfully transferred 10,000 yuan to my father, playing the obedient daughter. Dad, here's all my money. Don't be mad. Mom just hasn't decided yet. We wouldn't have to share the money if brother hadn't found out. You should talk to Mom. She should give some money. Our relatives won't leave easily. My father, pleased with the 10,000 yuan, glared at my mother. It's all your fault for hiding it. That money should have been ours. Fine, we have 1 billion. Let them have some. The main part is still ours. I nodded obediently, but inside I was laughing coldly. He was so generous. If he didn't care about the money, he wouldn't have been so happy about the 10,000. But spending 10,000 for peace was worth it. Chapter 9. My father took the money and went out to gamble again. My mother silently approached me. Audrey, you're really something. Where did you get 10,000 yuan? The person in the photo is you, isn't it? It's you, isn't it? She started shouting. I knew I could fool everyone else, but not my mother. But so what? Everyone believed she won the lottery. Even if she denied it, no one would believe her. I looked at her expressionless. Mom, what are you talking about? You gave me that money. We have the chat history. Mom, are you confused? Go rest. My mother raised her hand to hit me but lowered it. I didn't argue and went to rest. Half a month later, my aunt came again. She clung to my mother, crying, Sister, please help me. Lucas's girlfriend is threatening to break up because he doesn't have a house. You have so much money. Just give me a few 100,000. Sister, you don't want Lucas to be alone, do you? My mother said nothing, looking numb. My aunt grew desperate. Sister, you can't just watch us suffer. Lucas's future depends on you. Sister, give us the money. My mother looked at her coldly. I'll say it again. I have no money. I didn't win the lottery. Go away. My aunt's face turned red. Sister, how can you be like this? You have so much money. What's wrong with giving us some? You can't be so stingy. I'm your sister. My mother remained silent. My aunt cursed her and left, slamming the door. Later, my other aunt came asking for money. My mother refused. My aunt cursed her in the family group chat, calling her heartless and ungrateful. Other relatives joined in, but my mother didn't react. Oh right. Her phone had been damaged in the water. My father hadn't been home to buy her a new one. She didn't know she was now seen as heartless by our relatives. When we went back to our hometown for the new year, my mother didn't want to go, but my father dragged her along. She had a new phone bought by my father, but he had changed her number, so her old chat history was gone. My father's attitude towards my mother had improved. He no longer hit or scolded her, and sometimes even spoke kindly to her. My mother seemed happier. But when we arrived in our hometown, surrounded by relatives, her face turned cold again. Our relatives, still hoping for money, wouldn't give up. They took turns trying to persuade her to share the money. But my mother kept saying she had no money. The atmosphere grew tense. My aunt tried to lighten the mood. "All right, it's the new year. Let's eat." She urged everyone to eat, and they reluctantly resumed eating and drinking. Chapter 10. During the meal, one of my uncles, drunk, staggered over and started yelling at my mother. "I mean's wife, how can you be so stingy? You have 1 billion yuan and won't share a few 100,000 with us. We're family. You can't be so heartless. When people get rich, they help their family. But you hoard the money and won't give us a cent. You can't spend all that money in a lifetime." His words sparked an uproar. The room became chaotic. Some even shouted about beating my mother to make her share the money. My mother's face was grim. She didn't defend herself, just kept eating. Until Lucas arrived. Drunk, he staggered to my mother and smashed a beer bottle over her head. Blood immediately flowed down her face, dripping onto her clothes. The sudden violence stunned everyone. By the time they reacted, my mother had fainted. Lucas, still furious, tried to hit her again but was stopped. My mother needed stitches. When my father arrived, he defended her, making the scene even more chaotic. The men, drunk and driven by greed, lost control. When things finally calmed down, someone lay on the floor, covered in blood. It was Lucas. He lay there, dirty and motionless. Realizing someone was hurt, everyone sobered up and rushed him to the hospital. But it was too late. Lucas had lost too much blood. My aunt looked at my mother with hatred. The gathering couldn't continue. Everyone left. I went home with my parents. Because of the heavy snow, those who couldn't leave had to stay together. In the middle of the night, a fire broke out. In the dead of winter, with doors and windows closed, 7 or 8 people inside didn't survive. Someone called the police. After investigating, they concluded it was arson and started making arrests. My aunt confessed. "I set the fire. You all deserve to die. My Lucas is gone. None of you should live." My other aunt slapped her. "Lucas's death isn't our fault. He brought it on himself, drinking and acting like a fool. If he hadn't started it, there wouldn't have been a fight. He had no sense. No wonder his girlfriend left him. Someone like him finding a girlfriend was a miracle." My aunt's words enraged my other aunt. She glared at my mother. "Wang Courtney, it's all your fault. If you had given us the money, Lucas's girlfriend wouldn't have left him. It's all your fault. You have so much money. Why won't you share it? You heartless woman." She tried to attack my mother but was taken away by the police. After she left, my aunt cried bitterly. Because of my mother's supposed lottery win, both sides of the family were here. During the new year, with deaths in each family, who could be happy? But I felt a sense of satisfaction. Because of imaginary money, they had torn each other apart. Who could they blame? I hadn't even done anything and they ended up like this. If they hadn't been so greedy, none of this would have happened. In my previous life, they took my money from my father and ignored my pleas, letting me be beaten. They deserved this fate. Chapter 11. We left our hometown half a month later. Before we left, my mother was hounded by relatives for money. She told them she had none and sent them away. Back home, my father went gambling again. I quietly prepared to leave the country. My mother was too quiet. I felt she was planning something, so I stayed. I would have been in real trouble. I thought about my next steps. Seeing my suitcase gave me an idea. Chapter 11. When I left my hometown, it was half a month later. Before we left, my mother was still being pestered by relatives for money. She told them she had no money and sent them away. Back home, my father went out to gamble again. I quietly prepared to leave the country. My mother was too quiet. I felt she was planning something, so I decided to be cautious. I returned to my rented apartment. I planned to quit my job again, but I was transferred abroad for a business trip. This suited me perfectly, so I started the paperwork. After terminating my lease on a sunny afternoon, I boarded a plane and left. Later, my father called, saying my mother wouldn't give him money and asking me to help. I told him I was on a business trip abroad and brushed him off. To prevent suspicion, I transferred him another 20,000 yuan, saying it was my salary and that he should spend it while I worked on my mother. After that, I got busy with work and stopped sending him money. 2 months later, I received a call from the police station. The officer said debt collectors had come to my house, and my father had gotten into a fight with them and was stabbed to death. My mother, in turn, had stabbed the debt collector and was now in prison. It was truly karma. In my previous life, I took the knife for him. This time, the knife that should have been for him finally found its mark. I never expected my frail mother to kill someone with a knife. It was unimaginable. I returned home. My father was already buried, and my mother was in prison. I went to visit her. She was emaciated, even thinner than before. She looked numb, her face expressionless, a far cry from her former self. Before leaving, I looked her in the eye and said slowly, "The person in the photo was me. I won the lottery. 30 million. Lucas wasn't lying." Her lifeless eyes suddenly focused, glaring at me with murderous intent. "Audrey, you'll die a horrible death." "Ah, Audrey, I'll kill you." I smiled at her. "You're wrong. The one who will die a horrible death is you. And I will live a life of luxury." I watched her seethe with rage as I slowly walked out of the detention center. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, and my future was full of promise.